Welcome to the Body and Beyond podcast with Alice and Gina,
a podcast sparking discussion on all things health, mindset, fitness, goals, and motivation.
We strive to help you to boost your confidence, to take the lead in your own life, to back yourself, and to step into your full potential. Body and Beyond is proudly sponsored by The Seed Cycle. The Seed Cycle is a beautiful female-founded Australian company. Seed cycling is a natural methodology that you can use to support your menstruation and your ovulation, and it can even be used to support your hormones through perimenopause and menopause. If you'd like 50% off your first month subscription, use the code BODYANDBEYOND at the Seed Cycle website www.theseedcycle.com.au.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Body and Beyond podcast. Today I'm here with Gina and our special guest, Ash. Gina, would you like to introduce our guest for today?
I would love to. Today we have the amazing Ashleigh Boehm from Warrior Woman Wellness joining us to discuss the topic of perfectionism. So for our listeners, Ash, can you please tell us a bit about yourself and your background in the health and fitness industry, how you've transitioned into coaching, and the evolution of your brand into Warrior Woman Wellness?
Okay, so I'm going to start right back because I feel like there's relevance here. So I was a very sporty young child. I was a gymnast from the age of about 5 to 14. So I've always experienced the world through my body, and my body was very ingrained into my identity from a very young age. So like most people, I started like a career in the corporate world and then realized that it was like slowly numbing me out and was definitely not my calling. So I took the leap and became a personal trainer back in 2011. And I worked as a gym floor trainer for quite a while. That's where I met Alice. We used to work together at Fitness First in Bondi, which is really cool. And yeah, I had a thriving PT business for maybe 6-7 years. Was really, doing well, but there was like a little nudge or a little something calling in me that I realized there was something deeper, something more that I really wanted to do in this space. I knew that I was here to help women specifically, but there was something that was telling me that I needed to go a little bit deeper. So it was around that time that I started a spiritual journey and a self-development journey as well. And this is when things really started to shift for me in a different direction. So as I began to, I guess, grow and evolve as a woman, within myself, my business started to kind of grow and evolve alongside me as well. So I studied NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which is very like mindset-based stuff. And I really went deep into like the spiritual realm as well within myself. And I guess what I was learning through that process was how we relate to our physical bodies, which was like the level that I was working with women on at this point, was very much symptomatic of all the beliefs and the identities that were lying in the deeper layers below. And so I knew that, like I said, my calling was to help women connect deeply to themselves. But working on the purely physical level in the training and nutrition space was, I began to realize it was kind of like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound sort of thing. As in, working on that level without dealing with the deeper layers was kind of creating this cycle where people would just revert back to who they believe that they are at their core and their belief systems. So my business began to kind of like reorient to an inside out sort of approach. So I rebranded from Chicks Who Lift, which is obviously very fitness lifting based, which is my original brand, to Warrior Woman Wellness, which actually came to me in a dream. Because I'm not sure if you guys know much about feminine archetypes, Gina. We kind of spoke about this in one of my programs, but the warrior is my strongest feminine archetype. And in this dream, I had the realization that my calling here on earth is to help activate the warrior in every other woman. And the warrior archetype is strong and resilient. She's a protector. She cares deeply about her tribe. She's strong and resilient, and she's someone who really takes charge of her own life, and she's someone who takes charge of her own destiny. So I realized that that's why I'm here, and that's how that name was reborn. I guess we'll talk a little bit about my personal journey soon, but I really have this strong belief that our karma becomes our dharma, and karma meaning like the good and bad that we receive in this lifetime from the last lifetime, like what lessons we're here to learn, our soul is here to learn, becomes what we then put back into the world. And so my soul's journey in this lifetime was to evolve beyond the challenges, which we'll probably talk about, and then teach that to other women. So that's kind of like the process I was in within myself. And then I was realizing that like through learning and through evolving through these challenges, that's what I was here to help with. Like, yes, the training and nutrition stuff is wonderful. And I still definitely do that, but it was the deeper level stuff that really started to, I guess, become my passion in my business.
And I attended one of your seminars years ago here in Canberra. I believe it was on the female menstrual cycle and training around your cycle, which is fantastic. And I've absolutely loved watching you evolve, Ash, over the last few years. It's like, I don't know what it was, like 5-6 years. So I've really seen that transition, and you really embody everything you're learning and now teaching other women. So it's so powerful to watch. So I'd love to hear your journey specifically around working through perfectionism. I know you have got a lot of personal experience, and you've had perfectionism show up in your life, and you have done so much work on it. So please elaborate on that, your personal journey with that.
Yeah. So being a child gymnast, perfectionism was literally drilled into me from a very young age. So gymnastics is the sport of perfection. You literally get ranked on how perfect you are. Which is pretty crazy. So during the ages of 0 to 7, which is what's known as the imprint period, this is when we are being programmed with our values and belief systems. So when we're little kids at this age, we take everything so literally. We don't understand nuance. We don't understand context. We don't understand tone. So everything we experience during this imprint period, we make it mean something about us. And we start to take on that as like, we create meaning for it in regards to who we are, how worthy we are, and how the world works. It's also the time that the ego is being formed, which explains that. And because I was a gymnast from age 5, this was very prominent time for my development and my belief system. So what we experience and witness during this time becomes our model for the world. And during this time will dictate what happens to us, like what happens to us during this time will literally dictate how we turn up as an adult. Like as 30-something-year-old women, we are still acting from the programming that we received when we were 0 to 7 years old, unless you consciously go in and reprogram, of course. So I was a very good little gymnast. I was really good at what I did. So I was constantly being praised for winning and getting all these high scores. And there's a term in NLP that says whatever fires together, wires together. So what that means is that when there are two things that occur at the same time, we infuse them in our brain as being intrinsically tied together. So for me, perfect performance and performing at a ridiculously high standard meant I got love and attention. So my little child brain, who didn't understand that, of course, I was lovable regardless, created the calculation and the belief that a perfection and high performance meant love and attention, and that's the only way I could get it. So that's how I believed that my worth was, my worth was instilled through performing. And so began my crippling perfection complex. And it was so bad. I put so much pressure on myself as a little girl that I would be physically violently ill before competitions. I had a few like psychotic snaps after competitions because my nervous system was so dysregulated. Even when I won, like I'd win and I'd come home and like break shit, throw stuff around, punch my mom, like because my little body couldn't deal with the amount of pressure that had been built up and the amount of people watching me. And I wouldn't even like take part in like a running race at school if I felt like I couldn't win, because coming second was not acceptable for me. So I would like fake an injury. I was like the most injured little kid you'd ever come across, because if I didn't feel like I was going to win, I just couldn't do it. And so a lot of joy was robbed from me. A lot of like just being able to be in the moment was robbed from me as a little kid, because I had this internalized pressure that I believed that if I came second, then I wouldn't be loved, that I'd be rejected by my parents or by my peers or whatever, because of what had been imprinted on me. And what seems like really harmless and just people being really encouraging for me doing well. But my little brain didn't create that meaning. It attached this different meaning to it. So yeah, when I quit gymnastics and it all became too much, with high school and everything, I was doing it up until age 14. I then lost my identity because how could I was perfect through gymnastics, and that how I maintained my worth was by performance. And then without that, I was like, well, then how do I be perfect now? So I developed an eating disorder. And this spanned for 15 years on and off. And obviously eating disorders, they're very nuanced as well. But for me, it was very much about trying to maintain a perfect body or perfect image or controlling something. And it would I'd make progress out of it, and then I'd feel rejected or something would happen and I'd relapse, because for me, rejection meant that I wasn't perfect enough. So therefore I'd cycle back into trying to control my body to become perfect as a way to maintain self-worth or get love again. So when I entered into the fitness industry, I felt like weight training and no longer trying to be like perfectly skinny would be like the answer to all my problems. And like, it just shifted me from striving for a perfectly skinny body to now striving for like a perfectly jacked and shredded body, which was just like the same kind of thing, but just looked different. I was just being praised for looking very different. So it was empowering because I no longer wanted to be smaller. And that's what I told myself. But when I really was honest with myself, I'm like, yeah, I'm not trying to be skinny anymore, but I'm now trying to be like perfectly fit, perfectly, shredded and have the perfect fitness body. So it kind of just transmuted into something completely, the same, I guess. So
I can definitely relate to that a little. I think coming from a ballet background, it's interesting.
Yeah, well, ballet, same kind of thing. Like everything is so precise and perfect at ballet, and if you miss something, you get criticized, right?
Yeah. So I think just that whole idea of like losing your identity after you've built this like identity around something for so long from a childhood, and then you quit and it's like, who am I?
Yeah. Like, how do I now prove I'm worth?
Yeah.
100%. And it can be really debilitating, and it seems harmless at the time.
And at such a young age as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was always like those individual sports that did it. A team sport, I was fine. I loved team sport because I could blame someone else if we lost. I could like tell myself it wasn't me that lost, it was the team, and that was fine. I could deal with that. But when it was just me, I couldn't lose. I couldn't. It was like so intense. And I wasn't like aggressively competitive. I would just like not take part unless I knew I was going to win. But the thing with perfectionism, and even like when it came to my body and when I was, in my early years in the fitness industry, is because perfectionists at a core level believe that they're not worthy as they are. And we hold that belief. When we hold a belief, we create circumstances in our environment to reaffirm that belief. This is just how beliefs work, is if we believe it to be true, we will literally make it true by acting in a way or behaving in a way that reaffirms that belief, that creates the result in our life. So regardless of how lean or jacked or shredded I got, or how much amazing feedback I got from people about how much they admired my body, it was still never enough because I wasn't enough. So it was always, the goalpost was continually moving for me. So it was just got more and more intense, and the pressure built and built and built. And that's the thing about perfectionism, is that the standards are always unrealistically high, to the point where you can't reach them, because the function of them being so high is to reaffirm the belief that you're not worthy or you're not enough. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like the loop that you get stuck in, and it's dangerous. And things like counting macros for me went from being educational to like very dangerous. Obviously there can be a lot of perfectionistic thinking around getting the numbers like exactly right. Like if I was a 1 gram over, like fail, and people do end up in this space. If they go 5-10 grams over, just seeing the number being off can trigger a sense of failure, whereas we know that the human body doesn't work like a robot, and going over and under is like a really natural thing to do as far as the way that our bodies function, our metabolisms function. They're not really like static. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But that kind of triggered it a little bit more. And I just got to the point where I was like, as a coach and someone who is meant to be a leader and someone who's meant to be like helping people, I'm like, this is really fucked up. Like I'm really messed up. And then as a coach, we project our issues onto other people. We can't help but subconsciously project onto our clients. And if there's something that we're struggling with, they're going to feel the energetics of that, and they're going to feel the standard. If we're not even verbally communicating it, we're not directing them, they feel our energy. Everyone feels each other's energy. And it was so irresponsible for me to be teaching something to someone else when I was like really distorted in that behavior. I'm not saying that counting macros is bad for everyone, but for me, it's really misaligned to coach something when I'm like, I can't fucking do it because it turns me into a psycho. So I didn't really feel right about continuing down that route. So it's around that time that I started like learning the informed eating method, which is something that I coach now when it comes to nutrition. So that's kind of like what I started doing with myself, which allowed me to have structure and flexibility. And then that's the way that I started coaching with nutrition. So yeah, so that's pretty much where my journey went. I guess that's how it started to manifest. And the healing started to take place, I guess, when I was just going deeper and deeper and deeper into my personal development stuff, working with coaches and really helping me uncover what was really going on and what was really happening for me. And I really just became so deeply aware that I was here to heal, but I was actually projecting my damage or my wounds onto my clients. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's irresponsible of me to be coaching when like I need to clean house, I need to sort myself out, and then, you know, come into these coaching containers of the clean energy and not project my wounds onto them, regardless of how much I thought I was separate from it. It's impossible to do that. We're human beings. So I did a lot of inner child healing, going back, reprogramming that little girl who needed to hear that she was totally loved and worthy regardless of what she did or how she performed. I did a really deep inner child healing. I worked with a kinesiologist to help regulate my nervous system, to feel safe having my imperfections being exposed, because it's not only like a brain thing, our bodies feel very unsafe. If you're a perfectionist and you go out into the world and do something imperfect, you literally freak out. Like it feels very weird and very unsafe. So I had to work on that energetic kind of kinesiology level to clear the nervous system dysregulation that I would feel whenever I would slip outside my perfectionism. Also worked with like mindset coaches to reprogram the limiting beliefs that I was holding that were connecting my self-worth to performance and perfection, and just untangle those two things together. And yeah, that's kind of like now what I coach is that whole process of helping people uncouple their inherent self-worth from things that have got nothing to do with who they are as a beautiful human being. And that's things like performance, that's things like body image, that's things like what they can do for others. So it's literally that's the space I'm working in right now.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the things I learned from you rather, is you said the saying, it was perfectionism is the fucking lowest standard because you produce nothing. Can you please elaborate on that for us, for our listeners?
I bet I said fucking too, didn't I?
Probably.
So perfectionism is the lowest standard because it doesn't actually exist, because perfectionism is a myth. There's no such thing as perfect. So when perfectionists think that they're just like really high standards, they're actually striving for the lowest standard, because the lowest standard is something that it doesn't even exist. So it's kind of like funny. So when someone, and it's funny because people often say they're a perfectionist and have such a pride around it, but when someone says, you know, I'm a perfectionist, what I hear is I have low self-worth. So I'm like, oh, okay, so you've got low self-worth.
Yeah.
Great. What are you doing about that? You know, nothing to be proud of to be a perfectionist. And, you know, this is where I think we need to separate the difference between a healthy striving mentality and a perfectionism mentality, because they are not the same thing. So healthy striving is like setting goals that are high but reachable. Perfectionism is setting unrealistic goals. So you set yourself up to failure to reaffirm the belief that you're not worthy. Like healthy striving is journey focused as well, as not just outcome focused, whereas perfectionism will only focus on the result, not the lessons and the journey that happens along the way. Healthy striving is being able to take criticism and feedback constructively and take it on. Perfectionists can't take feedback well. Every single bit of feedback, they take it as meaning something about them. They get very defensive and they really struggle. Seeing like healthy strivers can have a setback and like recover from it pretty well. Perfectionists really find it hard to recover from setbacks or perceived failures. Like it really floors them. It devastates them, and it takes them a long time to get over it. So those are the kind of similar, like differences between those two things. So when someone says I'm a perfectionist, they're either like telling you that they don't love themselves, or they just don't know how to say that they strive. They're healthy, they have a high standard for striving or whatever. So very different. So
that's really quite an important, I think that is really an important point that you made on being able to distinguish the difference between healthy striving and perfectionism. And me as obviously a coach, as an online coach, this is something that really resonates with me as well. When I chat to my clients and when we're talking about what their goal is, because often, you would know as well, being a coach, you would have people who come to you and go, I want to do this by this time. And you're like, well, hang on a second. One, like, why? What's your why? And two, like, you really have to kind of break it to them, whether it, and break it down and see whether that's really going to be realistic, because it's not just a numbers game, is it? It's not just this minus this equals this by this time. Like, there are so many other factors that come into healthy striving and progressing on your journey that is not, it's not something you can calculate.
No, human being is not a robot. It's not like, we are so complex. We are so complex. And the way we eat and the way we move is like I said earlier, is due to like how we've been programmed and conditioned to believe about ourselves and believe about food and exercise. And it's not just a matter of like calculating, in a online macro calculator, what's going to get you there in that time, because we all know that never happens, because there's so many different layers and complexities to every single unique human body to start with, but then also the emotional and mental factors that contribute to how someone got there in the first place, in the place that they don't want to be in. Number one, like, without even talking about that, like, there's mental and emotional issues that create people to be unhappy in their bodies, and by giving them like just a calculated macro count, it's like you're not dealing with that, and that issue won't go away. They will lose the weight and still fucking hate themselves, like, because like it's got nothing, like, and this is the thing, right? If having high self-worth and loving yourself was really dependent on having a certain body, if people believe that when I achieve this, I'll finally feel happy, if that was truth, then supermodels wouldn't have body dysmorphia, they wouldn't have eating disorders. Because if that were true, if having the perfect body meant that you loved yourself, then that wouldn't exist. But we know that they suffer from this stuff more than anything. It's because they place so much worth on it. And they don't have a sense of self or self-worth beyond the physical body. So you can diet all you want, but it won't change how you feel about yourself. It might change how other people perceive you. But then you start creating an attachment to being like, that's what makes me lovable, is how other people perceive me. Again, dangerous and not sustainable, because what if you gain the weight again? Then you feel unlovable. So, I mean, I think it's really awesome that people want to better themselves. And I think this is one of the things that perfectionists, they're scared to let go of their perfectionistic behaviors, because that means that they're scared that they're going to stop striving or stop being motivated, because self-criticism is a really strong form of motivation for a lot of people. And they think that if I give up perfectionism, I'm just going to become lazy. I'm going to get really fat. I'm going to become complacent, but it's just not the case, not the case at all. They just are able to become who they really are and start eating like they love themselves, as opposed to eating like they don't love themselves, or under.
It's not black and white, is it? At all. And a lot of also a lot of healthy, amazing, fit bodies, it doesn't mean that they're running perfectionism either, or they're over, a lot of, not over analyzing or over counting calories or being too regimented.
Not at all. And like, from personal experience, like I literally love my body more today than I ever have in my life. I'm 35 now. I've got probably more cellulite than I've ever had, but I can't even see it. Like, I look in the mirror, I don't see it because I'm not looking for it. I don't count macros. I haven't been on a diet in probably 3 or 4 years. I've not tried to lose weight in 3 and 4 years, but I absolutely love where I'm at. And like, there's nothing stresses me out when it comes to food. And I had an eating disorder for 15 years. I was a perfectionist for 15 years, and I felt like this is the only way that I'm going to be able to maintain a standard that I'm happy with, or maintain an image that like supports my business. That's like, I've always gotten feedback for, is like my body and being a certain way. And I was so terrified that if I let go of this, then I'm going to lose all that. But I didn't. I got more. Like, my body changed for the better, because I now eat like I love myself, and the energetic of that is shown and is represented in how I look. But also I have more fun. my energy, when we're like, this is the thing about perfectionists, is like, they're so selfish, because when you're a perfectionist, all you're doing is focusing on yourself and how people are perceiving you. All your energy is going in on you, and it's all self-obsession. Whereas when you start to let go of this and you start to like dismantle and dissolve all these beliefs and behaviors, you have more to give to other people. You can show up with more love, you show up with more energy, more inspiration to be creative, to share your gifts with the world. So being a perfectionist and being focused on yourself and your own body is very selfish. You know, you're denying the world your actual real gifts, which has got nothing to do with what you look like, or, you know, how good you are at performing a squat or a deadlift or winning a competition of some description. Because it's not about counting macros is good or bad. And it's not about competing on stage being good or bad. Everything is neutral. Everything in this world is neutral, just like drinking alcohol is not good or bad. But it's the energy that you're putting behind that and the intention of it. You know, like alcohol is like, if I'm drinking alcohol to get fucked up and forget about my life because I hate myself and I don't want to be here, that's different than going and have a cocktail with my girlfriend because I haven't seen her in a couple of weeks. It's all about how we utilize this thing and what our intention and energy is. And yeah, like I said, it's all neutral, but the perfectionistic mindset is very much self-centered.
Yeah.
And very much like, yeah, it's all about reaffirming the belief that we're not good enough, basically.
And that's also a really good point to make. Like, and one thing, you know, being all three of us work in the health and the fitness industry, so we know what it's like. When people come to, or they want a healthy stride, for example, I think this day and age with Instagram and social media, and I don't know, I just feel maybe that people can't determine the difference between whether they're healthy striving or they're not. And that's kind of the hard thing, I guess, is determining that fine line between what the why is and also what they really need to work on. Because like I mentioned earlier, you know, I often get inquiries from people who say, I want to lose this by this time. It's all about the number for one thing. And maybe it's not the scale, the weight, or that this person needs to actually work on to get forward in their journey. Do you know what I mean? It might be something more like working on mindset. I don't know, working on unraveling things from your past. So there's so many different elements to actually progressing and making change for good in your lifestyle. That doesn't necessarily mean eating a diet plan and exercising is the right one for you. That might not be the right path, you know,
right avenue. Yeah.
Well, essentially, I think when people come and they want to lose weight, they say they want to lose weight and they say we want to achieve a number. What they really want is to feel something, feel a certain emotion that they've associated with that number. And like I said, if they don't do the inner work that's also required to help them know what like unconditional love feels like for them, and what real self-love feels like, then they can reach that number and still feel quite empty. And I feel like that happens, or they sabotage, or things come in where they just don't quite get there because it's not an aligned decision. That's not coming from a place of love. They're like trying to move away from something they don't like, as opposed to just like, I want to lose the weight because I just want to feel better, or I want to like love myself more. I want to respect my body more, as opposed to I want to look like this because I feel like that's going to get me a boyfriend, or that's going to get me more Instagram followers, or that's going to get me something that's got nothing to do with really loving yourself more. It's got more to do with other people perceiving you as being something more attractive, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
So Ash, for our listeners, how would they identify if they're doing perfectionism? And do you have any practices or like simple tips for people?
Yeah, it's like it's such like a sliding scale, like grayscale, and there's like different varying degrees of like really extreme perfectionism and then just like small perfectionistic thinking and traits. And there's also different variations of perfectionism, so it's like multi-layered, but typically you might be trapped in a perfectionistic mindset if you have like black or white thinking, so like all or nothing, like win or lose, like I failed or I achieved. So for instance of tracking macros, if you go a little bit over, you might be, I failed that day, as opposed to I just went a bit over, you know what I mean? I did pretty good. So that might be something that comes up there. Highly self-critical, like experience like stress and anxiety regularly, particularly around like performance, whether that be at work or just in the gym or whatever. Again, focused on the end result, not the journey and the process and all the beautiful things that happen along the way, like very much just focus on like, did I get there or did I not? Definitely driven by like fear of rejection and failure. So a lot of the motivation for doing things is like out of like not wanting to be rejected or not wanting to fail. Procrastination is a really interesting one. So everyone thinks that perfectionists are like just like super productive, like really type A people, but procrastination is really common because with perfectionists, because perfection is impossible to do, what they do is they don't want to feel the shame of not completing the task perfectly or not being perfect. So then they procrastinate because they don't want to feel that. So then push it away and avoid it altogether. And the procrastination then leads to like more shame and guilt because they're not doing it and they know they're not doing it, which then reduces self-confidence even further as well. So procrastination is a really typical one. This other one that I find really interesting is half-assing things. Now, this is very, very fascinating. So perfectionists half-ass things. They don't give everything to the task or to the project or to the goal because they're so afraid that if they don't meet the goal, that it means that they failed. So what they'll do is they can use the excuse, if I didn't try my best or I didn't give it my all, then I can use the excuse of like, the reason I failed was because I wasn't really trying, you know, that's why, not because I'm not good enough. No. But it's just, I didn't try hard enough, because they're more attached to their potential and protecting their potential than pursuing it. Because if a perfectionist pursues their potential and fails, if they give it 1000% and they fail, that's fucking devastating. They can't deal with that. So what they'll do is they'll only give a little bit, because if they fail, then they have the excuse of like, yeah, because I didn't even try. And so they're so attached to the idea that they can be perfect, and it sustains that idea that they can be perfect if they wanted to, because it's possible. It's impossible. So it's like a really weird one. I was like, wow, when I learned about that, I'm like
I can see the logic in that, though.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah. And then if they do well, they're like, well, I must be so brilliant because I didn't even try, and look how well I did, or like I succeeded. And so they become very attached to potential, and their potential, more so protecting it than pursuing it. Like I said, they find it really hard to recover from setbacks and failures, which is why they avoid it by procrastinating and half-assing. And yeah, again, can't take feedback and criticism well. So moving through this stuff, of course, it's very subconscious. So to access the subconscious belief systems is a process. So like tips is hard, because you have to kind of really commit yourself to going back and reprogramming your brain to the point where you can like move forward differently and see the world differently and see yourself differently. And the journey of like finding true self-love and self-worth is a long one sometimes, or like not necessarily long, but you know, it takes time and it takes effort. But just some things that you can begin to do if you're noticing this come up with you is like just awareness is like the first thing, is like really feeling that those thoughts being activated and just separating from them, saying like, I can feel this coming up for me. I can tell that that's my perfectionist voice, and just like separating it from being you and just being a voice in your head that's telling you to do something. So creating the separation from the voice and who you are. Starting a spiritual practice of some description. So whether that be yoga or meditation, even journaling. I love, meditation because it helps really quiet the mind. Perfectionists are very heady people, very much overthinkers as well a lot of the time. And like I said, when we have a spiritual practice, we become connected to something that's greater than us. And one of the traits of perfectionism is like very self-centered, right? Or very self-focused. So when we start connecting to the things that are bigger than us, it kind of takes the focus away and helps us, put our energy in towards something else. And it's just like a lovely thing to do. I recommend everyone to start a spiritual practice. It helps you just also connect with like your higher purpose here on earth. And usually it's not about being perfect. Like no one's higher purpose here on earth is to be a perfect human being. It's literally to like create some kind of like put more love out into the world, basically, in some form or another, whatever that looks like for you. It's always about creating more love. Taking imperfect action. So this is to do like taking small steps to do something that feels scary for you. So it might be like doing a random Instagram live or something. So if you're someone who feels like you have to be very prepared before you do something, because that's your perfectionism that wants to be like perfect so people don't judge you for making a mistake or for being, unprepared, do something completely random, like jump on a live and just talk about something that you know about but you haven't prepared for, or like even uploading an unedited photo. Like a lot of people I know on Instagram edit all of their photos to look a certain way, or to look, a certain aesthetic, or to fit the grid perfectly. Like slapping something up there that's unedited will feel like weird, or maybe when your body doesn't look perfect, an angle that you're not really liking. Doing something like that can really push against that voice that tells you that you can't. So actually taking an action that, instills the belief that, yeah, you can, and no one's going to unfollow you or hate you. And if they do, well, fuck them, because they're assholes and they don't want to be, you don't want them in your space anyway. So doing small things like that, finding models of excellence. So these are people who are out there, who are living imperfect lives and putting it all out there, who are just like so embodied, so happy to just be who they are, really model authenticity and imperfect authenticity, and like just being in their energy as much as possible, and all the time, and as well like unfollowing or just maybe disengaging from people who trigger your perfectionistic thinking. So if you compare yourself to someone and you look at someone and be like, she's perfect, that can be bad, because it really creates a comparison, and then you just it keeps you in that loop of like, this is what I need to be, is that. So someone who's only ever projecting a perfect life, a perfect body, they're not showing different parts of themselves that help you see the humanness in them. It might be good to just like take a break from seeing that person's page and start to engage with more authentic people, or more people who are just like showing up in a different way, I suppose. And yeah, just like, I guess, journaling about the things about your family and friends that you really love, that they're imperfections, because like the people in your life don't love you because you're perfect, and you don't love them because they're perfect. So acknowledging the things that you love about like your partner or your mum or your dad, that are their imperfections that you actually really think are cute or quirky or whatever, that you really appreciate, is a great way to really start to instill that like people are lovable because they're imperfect and because they're unique. So yeah, those are kind of like some little tips to start.
I was just going to add, what do you think about bringing awareness to when someone is procrastinating, and trying to notice that when they're avoiding actually taking action?
Imperfect action. That would be just like something I spoke about in my Embody program, one that we did recently, is like just taking the first small step. So a lot of the time perfectionists get overwhelmed by the end result. Remember, they're so end result focused. So taking the first step, the first minor first step, where no matter how small it is, will help build that momentum of like, okay, I'm taking action and I'm moving forward. And something that just feels safe to their nervous system is like, yeah, just consistently taking action. So don't focus too much on the end, focus on what's one thing I can do today to start to like shift this forward. Is always a good idea. Yeah, start small.
I just wanted to ask a personal question, Ash.
Yes.
On your journey of like, I guess you would say finding yourself, right? Because you had to take all those layers off of who you were trying to be or who you perceived yourself to be. And obviously through your journey, you've really, I guess, taken all those layers out and really become more aware of yourself. I would love to know if there's anything that you've kind of discovered about yourself, anything at all that you may have not known in the past before this evolved version of yourself.
That's a really interesting question. I always had this, because my body was my massive focus for my whole life, I always thought that I was unintelligent. I always thought that like and it wasn't, and obviously that's a distorted belief. I know that that's not true, but because I've been so focused on my body and bodies and all that kind of stuff, I really didn't understand how, I guess, how much knowledge I had as well, but also how intuitive I am. So the more I became connected with my body beyond what it looks like, and just like really deeply embodied in myself as a woman, as a human being, like I'm actually, this is going to weird you out, I'm actually quite psychic as well. So I receive a lot of, like, Jane has been on some of my trainings. When I do I do all my programs live, and I'll write a few notes, but I just like talk, and sometimes things drop in, but I'm like, I've never said that word before. I've never said that sentence. I don't know where it came from. And so that's part of like removing the focus on myself and connecting to my spirituality, and also like cultivating, or really acknowledging my intelligence, and focusing in on that and how I can expand that to help other people, meant that like, I have like prophetic dreams and shit, like I like literally dream about things and then they happen, and just constantly receiving lots of information. that, yeah, I just didn't even know that I knew, because my energy is expanding to moving away from, how I look or how I'm performing, and more to like, what are my gifts and how can I spread this with the world, and how can I help women on a really, profound level. So that's been really cool, is like, yeah, tapping into like my psychic abilities has been pretty wild. And also as a teacher, like being able to show up imperfectly in my coaching programs as well. Like I ramble about random stuff. I'll every single time I teach something, even if it's the same content, it's a different experience, because I'm so intuitive with what's coming through and who's there. Whereas as a perfectionist, I would just have to stick to what I written down, and I would be reading it robotically, and that's what I was delivering. And now I'm so much more comfortable with who I am that I'm just happy to turn up and just talk, So yeah,
that's beautiful.
That's really inspiring.
And on that note, you have an online masterclass coming up. I think it's in a few days by the time we get the podcast up.
Yeah.
So it's to help people overcome perfectionism. So I'd love to hear more about that. And for some of our listeners, if they'd like to join you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be a Zoom masterclass on the 15th of December at 7 p.m. Sydney, Melbourne time. And basically what I'm going to be teaching is, how to identify the root cause of your perfectionism. It's different for everybody, obviously, the different types of perfectionism, how it manifests in your life, what it's costing you and what it's kind of holding you back from. Also how to retain some of the positive aspects of perfectionism as well, and like transmute it into the healthy striving kind of energy that we spoke about. And also I teach the cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, which is like how you reprogram, of how to move through perfectionism, thinking and behaviors, so you can really connect to who you are and show up really authentically and be fully expressed, and just have more fun and experience more joy and more love. That's what it's all about, is letting go of the things that we're gripping on so tightly that are preventing us from really living like a really beautiful life.
Sounds so good. I'm sure some of our listeners would love to jump on for that. So we will definitely pop the details of that in our podcast notes.
So we normally wrap up the podcast with a question for our listeners. So today's question, guys, is what is something that you have been procrastinating on recently? Reflect on that for a moment. You know exactly what it is. What is that one thing you can do today to take action, to back yourself, and to fucking start moving towards what it is that you want? And our second question. So I'd just love to remind our listeners of the importance of always coming back to your why. What are you wanting to achieve, or why are you wanting to achieve a certain goal? What are the reasons, and are those reasons serving you well?
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it.
As always, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to take a screenshot, share, so we can build our Body and Beyond listening community, and stay tuned for our next topic. The Body and Beyond podcast is for information purposes only. This podcast does not constitute advice or services, and the statements and views of the hosts and guests are not medical advice. The information provided should not be used for treatment or diagnosis purposes. Please discuss any information from this podcast with your healthcare professional before making any changes to your lifestyle.